Welcome back everyone to another StarWarsUnlimited deck video, and today I am finally bringing you my updated Boba Fett ambush deck. Let me tell you right now, this deck is still as annoying as ever to play against. We're still ambushing all of their opposition's units while boosting them with Boba's ability. Not just that, Twilight Republic has given us a few very tasty toys to improve this deck. If you tried out my ambush deck from the previous set, then you're gonna love this deck, because it's literally that, just better. But one thing, before we jump into the leader, the base, and the deck, if you enjoy StarWarsUnlimited content, and especially deck building content, then make sure to like and subscribe, because there's going to be plenty more to come, especially with a new set approaching us. With that done, let's get on to this leader. For this ambush deck to work, we need Boba. Why? Why do we need Boba? Well, he's got an ability that reads, when you play a unit that has one or more keywords, keywords is always highlighted in red text. For example, Cloud Rider got the red ambush. You may exhaust this leader. If you do, give a friendly unit +1 for this phase. So how does that actually help us with our ambush deck? Well, in StarWarsUnlimited, you can pick the order things activate. So if you play out a Cloud Rider, you will activate Boba first, because as a keyword, you can exhaust him and give a +1 to this Cloud Rider. Then you can activate the ambush second, meaning you've then got a 4 ambush card for 2 costs. Do you see why this deck can get quite silly? When Boba deploys, he comes out on 6. He's a 4/7 that reads each other friendly unit that has one or more keyword gets +1. So basically, he's out, everything's getting the +1. So when you ambush out, you don't need to do the combo, it just hits out for 4. By the way, a nice little bit of tech for you. If this is your field right now and you've got a Cloud Rider just chilling, you can then play out another Cloud Rider, activate Boba, giving this one the +1, so it's 4 attack, then attack whatever. Then when you deploy this Boba, it gets another +1, meaning for this turn, it has 5 attack. Please don't forget about that little bit of tech, because it can come in so clutch for you. For our base, we want to run yellow. Well, there's so many ambush cards in yellow that you kind of have to. And not just that, it's Jabba's Palace and it's Boba Fett Dynamo. So, you know, it has to fit the theme. So with our leader and the base done, let's crack on to these ground units. Starting things off is a 2 cost, and well, you'll know what it is. I've showed it to you already. That is 3 Cloud Riders. This card is just the epitome of what this deck does. Why? Well, 2 cost that simply just reads ambush. 3/1 ambush. But with Boba, it makes it a 4/1 ambush card. If you haven't played this deck, I don't think you realise how much value this card gets for 4 damage for 2 resources. This card, as well as many others, is the reason why the opposition really needs to think what they're gonna play. Because if they, on their 4 resource turn, play something with 4 health, you're just gonna one-shot it for 2 resources. Because it basically costs nothing to play, it's the reason we can kind of control what's being played, because we're just like, I don't like that being there. Boom, here's my boosted Cloud Rider. Moving on to our next ground unit is another 2 cost, and that is 3 Crafty Smugglers. You may be thinking, hang on a minute, this isn't an ambush card. No, but it does have shielded, so he comes out shielded 2/2. But if you activate Boba, he becomes a 3/2 shielded for 2 resources. Not just that, he's got the underworld tag, as most of this deck actually has. Why is that important? Because we like to run McClunky in this deck. Do you know what's really nice? Turn 1, you go Crafty Smuggler, they do whatever. Turn 2, you Crafty Smuggler, defeating whatever they had. You can then McClunky it back to hand, play it back out, activate Boba, boost in another unit. And while I'm talking about 2 costed units that come out shielded, let's tell you my next one. That's the next 2 cost card, and that's 3 L337s. So, this card reads, when played, you may rescue a captured card. If you don't, give a shield token to this unit. So 90% of the time it's going to come out shielded, but it's got smuggle, so you know what that means. It's a keyword. I can boost it with Boba. Also, it's another underworld, meaning we can also McClunky this card. Because if we run all these like low cost and shielded and ambush units, this deck can just do absurd amount of damage for almost nothing. So for example, you've got L3 out, right? It's got a shield. They play a unit out. You can ambush with Cloud Rider, boosting this L33, so it's up to 3 damage. Normally defeating it. Then they might play something else out. Well, oh well, that's exhausted. You can get 3 damage to base with L3. Or maybe you want to take their unit out. And then if they're not dead, you can then McClunky it back to hand, doing an extra 3 damage. So I was running Coruscant Guard in this deck. For those who don't know what it is, it's a 2-cost 3 damage 2 health unit that does have ambush, but only when you got Coordinate online. But to be honest, I just found getting an L3 or Crafty Smuggler out turn 1 with the shield and the possibility to McClunky it just so much better. Also, don't underestimate how powerful a shield is into aggro decks. They just can't do anything if you just keep hitting their units away. Okay, moving on to our 3-cost ground units. We've got 2 Sundari Peacekeepers. I know, I'm letting you down without the ambushing at the moment, but why is this in here? Well, it's a 1/5 with Ray 2 and Restore 2, meaning with Boba, if you boost him, this card's going to hit for 4 damage. This card's just too good not to include in this deck. Because it hasn't got ambush on it, I haven't got more of them in here. I would not blame you if you drop any cards for more Sundari. It's just insanely strong. And our next 3-costing card is an absolute behemoth in the deck. Because of Boba, that's 3 Echo-based Defender. If you play this bad boy out, activate Boba, making him a 5/3 Sentinel. By far, my most favourite thing I've done with this card is play out my 3 resources, right? Next turn, 4 resources. I've played out a L337, boosted this to a 5/3. They then played out Sabine. This is 1-shotter. I also found in my previous build of this deck that sometimes decks were getting quite a lot of damage into our base early if we weren't seeing those ambush cards. So playing this out to slow them up really helps the deck. And to be honest, even if it's late game, dropping this and boosting it to a 5/3 Sentinel is so valuable for you. So that's it for our 3-costing units. And some of you may be thinking, hang on, what about Phase 2 Clone Trooper that's a 3-costing 3/2 ambush? You can make that a 4/2. Yes, I can, but it's basically always going to get defeated when you ambush it. So why pay 1 more for basically another Cloud Rider that's just not as good in my opinion? If you wanted to go ultra trolly and run as many ambushing cards as you want, feel free to drop the Echo-based Defender for the Phase 2. I tried it. Trust me, I did. It's funny, but it's just not as good. Some of you may be also thinking, hang on, this is an ambush deck. We haven't had too many ambush cards so far. Well, that's about to change, as basically everything from now on is ambush. And kicking things off is a 4-cost and has 3 modded cohort. Say what you will about the Book of Boba Fett and these characters, but you can't deny it's a good card. So, what is it? It's a 2/4 with ambush, but it gets raid 2, meaning it's a 4/4. It's 4-LOM for your deck. However, because of Boba, this becomes a 5/4 ambushing card for 4 resources. Whew, this card is so important for your deck. It could one-shot so many things. It could one-shot Sabine when she's deployed. So if you know they're just holding on to their resources for a Darksaber, keep this in your hand. As soon as they deploy that Sabine, one-shot, see you later. That's actually it for our 4-costing ground units, but I'm going to check this in here now. It's in our side deck. We do run 3 Hidden Sharpshooter, which is yet again another ambush card. They can ambush for 5 with Boba. I'm putting this in here now because this card's really important when you do play the Sabine matchup, because you want to have that card that can just one-shot Sabine as soon as it comes out. But the reason it's not on the main deck, similar to the Phase 2 Clone Trooper, like if you want to go ultra trolly or ambush, go for it. I just found it a bit too much in your normal run-ins. And moving on to our 5-costing ground units is a card that is insanely strong normally, but in this deck, it's a whole nother level. That is 3 Plo Koons. So, this card has got ambush and coordinate. When he's got coordinate online, he gets raid 3, meaning it's a 6/6 ambush, but with Boba, a 7/6 ambush. Do you realise that Plo Koon can one-shot Jango Fett the turn he comes out? We've got coordinate online. Insane. But please, please, please remember, to get that raid 3, you do need coordinate online. That's also a big reason to why we run all those shielded units early, because it gives us a higher chance of having, well, more units on the field. Worst case scenario, you don't have coordinate online, you end up ambushing, boosting him, he's a 4/6. You know, it could be worse, but coordinate makes this card insanely good. And moving on to our 6-costing ground units is a card that was so good and was so effective in this first build of the deck, I had to keep it for the second. That's 2 General Riken, still can't say it. So, this card is a 5/7 that reads, when played and on attack, choose a friendly unit. If it has Sentinel, give an experience token to it. Otherwise, it gains Sentinel for this phase. Normally, you end up sentineling him or give an experience token to your Echo base. But my favourite thing to do with this card is if my Boba Fett is out with Boba Fett's armour, you play out Recon, giving this Sentinel. Have fun getting through that. I just found in my very first build of this deck that this card was vitally important for it winning, so I couldn't drop it. In this new build, yet again, he fits perfectly. However, as someone clarified me into the rules, this doesn't actually activate as a keyword. So if you play him out, you can't activate Boba, which is unfortunate, but he's still insanely good. And moving on to our next 6-cost ground unit, that is a card I think is still so good within this deck, and I still don't think it gets the loves it deserves. That is free Enfys Nest. Why is this card so good? Well, ambush 5/4, you may be thinking, that's not a lot. Well, it can ambush for 6. But this bit is why it's so good. When a friendly unit is attacking using ambush, the defender gets -3 attack. This card can swing games so hard. Why? Because normally when you're ambushing all your units out, they tend to get defeated while defeating the opposition. This card basically means when you ambush everything out, they survive. So you end up with all these big units suddenly on the field and they've got nothing left. I've seen a few updated versions of this deck online and none of them run this anymore, but I just found it was so strong and one of the best cards within the deck. Okay, so moving on to our 7-costing ground units, and well, it's Enfys Nest again, but this time we got 2 of them. This one's a little bit different, because it's 5/7, hasn't got ambush, but has got saboteur, but more importantly, when played and on attack, you may return an enemy non-leader unit with less power than this unit to its owner's hand. So, when you play it out, you can boost it with Boba, meaning it then goes up to 6, meaning you can return anything with 6 or less power to the hand. This card on its own can just single-handedly shut down some opposition decks just through this ability. Just the amount of disruption it has is crazy. And rounding up our ground units is a card that's probably the best card within this deck, and that is 2 Han Solos. My word, is this card good. Why? Well, it's got ambush, so of course you can boost it with Boba, meaning it hits for 7, but this is the important part. While attacking, this unit deals combat damage before defender. So, if you defeat it with the 7 damage, no damage goes back to Han Solo. Oh, it's so good. Because you can boost him to 7, he can just one-shot so many things. This card on its own is insanely strong. But put Boba on top of that, like, honestly, I can't even begin to explain how much work this puts in. Just play it in the deck and find out. So that's our ground units done. Let's move on to the space units. Kicking things off, the space units is a 1-cost that has 3 cartel turncoats. It's a solid 1-cost 2/3, but it has got a bounty, which allows your opposition to draw a card. However, bounty is a keyword, so you can boost it to become a 3/3 1-cost. Not just that, it's underworld, so you can turn 1, play out 1 resource, and McClunk it with the other resource, pinging out that 3 damage. To be honest, 99% of the time, I play this out just for 1 for the free boost of Boba. It's essentially just paying 1 resource for a boost. It's really, really nice, and that 1 boost can win you games. For our next space unit, we're jumping all the way to 4-cost, and that is 1 Bright Hope. So it's a 2/6 Sentinel that reads, when played, you may return a friendly non-leader unit to its owner's hand if you do draw a card. That ability is really nice, because it means you can return, I don't know, a Cloud Rider to hand, so you got that back in turn for ambush, maybe an L3 or Crafty Smuggler back to hand that's lost its shield. Now you can play it back out and shield it again. Not just that, being able to play this out and boosting it, becoming a 3/6 Sentinel is so good. If you've ever played against this deck and played against the boosted Bright Hope, you know how much of a pain it can be. So I was actually originally running multiple copies of Bright Hope within this deck, but I just found because of my clunky already activating that costs 1 to do the same sort of bounce effect that I didn't really need many, but we have got more in the side deck. And for our next 4-cost space unit, we got 2 Azutuk Liberator Gunship. It is a 3/4 with ambush, so you know that means Boba makes it a 4/4 ambush. Just fitting the theme, ambush in space. By far, my favourite thing I do with this is normally just obliterating Lurking TIE Phantoms out of space and there's nothing they can do back. So maybe you play whatever in your free resource, they then play Lurking TIE, you claim initiative, okay, boom, see you later Lurking TIE Phantom. Moving on to 6-cost space units, we've got 2 Millennium Falcon, Lando's Pride. So it's 5/5, but of course Boba boosts it to 6, that reads, if played this unit from your hand, it gains ambush. You can smuggle it for 6, but it doesn't get that ambush. It's just a really nice 6 ambush in space. There's not much more to say about it. However, there's 2 favourite plays I really like to do with this. One of them, it can one-shot Ruthless Raider with a booster Boba, or you ambush this out, defeating a space unit, and then because it's Underworld, you McClunky this back to hand, doing the 3 damage to something else defeating it, meaning you've got this in hand to ambush out in the following turn. And rounding up our space units is an 8 cost, and that's one Arquitton's Assault Cruiser. So it's a 7/8 with ambush, meaning with Boba makes it 8/8 ambush that reads when this unit attacks and defeats a non-leader unit, put the defeated unit's player as a resource under your control. So it's a nice bit of ramp on top of the ambush. But let me just sum up how good this card is. Because you can boost it with Boba, it can one-shot Avengers with that ambush. Yes, one-shot Avengers. I also found once this comes out in space, it takes a lot of effort for them to deal with, and if they don't, it just wins you the game. So that's our space units done. Let's move on to the events and upgrades. Kicking things off with the events and upgrades, we've got 3 McClunkies. You saw it earlier, you knew it's coming. So this card reads, return a friendly non-leader Underworld unit to its owner's hand. If you do, deal 3 damage to a unit. Oh boy is it good. You've probably seen it in so many places. Have you noticed, most of our deck is Underworld, so this can activate with basically any of them. There's a few really high valuable plays you can do with this card. One of them is if your shielded unit has lost its shield, activate McClunky, bounce it back to hand, doing 3 damage out. Another one, if you've got one of your ambush cards and it's survived, you can activate McClunky, put it back to hand, meaning you've got that ambush for the next turn. Or, on your 8 resource turn with Emphas Nest, you can attack with Emphas, activating the when played ability, bouncing something to hand, activate McClunky, return it to hand, paying 7, bringing this out, and then bounce something else. Oh, the combos are so good. McClunky is one of the reasons we go for those shielded units, and we have such an Underworld theme throughout. Well, not just that, it also fits Boba being the Underworld King. Talking of Boba, we move on to our 2 costs, and that's 2 Boba Fett's armour. I know the other Boba Fett's been banned, so you may think it's not as good, but trust me, this Boba Fett with this armour is insane. Why? So, this card reads, attached to a non-vehicle unit. If attached unit is Boba Fett, the damage would be dealt to him, prevent 2 of that damage. First of all, gives it +2/+2, so it becomes a 6/9 that has 2 damage getting prevented all the time. Oh! You find that once you equip Boba Fett's armour, unless they activate like Rivals 4 or something like that, he just dominates the board and he just bullies the opposition so hard. Moving on to our next 2 costs is 3 Surprise Strikes. So, what does this card do? Attack the unit, it gets +3 for this attack. So, this is one of the reasons we can attack for base so fast for lots of damage. Or, what I really like to do, say if we've got one of our 2 cost and shielded units active, you activate Surprise Strike with it, hitting, defeating the unit, and all it does is defeat our shield. The amount of value that gives you is crazy. But yeah, this card, if any of our high damaging ambushing cards are on the field, means you can end up hitting for base like 7 or 8 damage per attack, which is absurd. Moving on to our 3 cost events and upgrades, we've got 2 Waylays. This card is insanely strong for the deck. It has 2 really good plays. One of them is, well, disrupting the opposition, just bouncing whatever on their side of the field back to their hand. Or, you've ambushed out, you survived, you can bounce your own ambushing unit back to hand to then have it to ambush out again. That is just so good, and the opposition never expects it. I also really like Waylay, so for instance, if you're playing like a Bosk Blue, and they're putting loads of bounties on your card, you can just Waylay it back to hand, get rid of those bounties. Really like Waylay at the moment. I'm preferring it more to spare the target, just because we can target our own cards. And rounding up the main deck is 2 7 costs, that's 2 U-Wing Reinforcement. So maybe it's later in the game, you haven't really got anything in hand, play this bad boy out. What does it do? Search the top 10 cards for up to 3 units of combined cost 7 or less, and play each of them for free. So normally, you can bring out an Emphas Nest, like the 7 cost, or Han Solo, and just one-shot anything. Or, if they got a bit of a swarm going on, you can ambush out with like 2 or 3 units. That one's always really funny to do. This card's just such a strong card, for the sheer reason of, well, sometimes you can bring out lots of little units, or sometimes, if you've got nothing in hand, it's suddenly being, boom, surprise Han Solo. I just found this deck, we tend to get to 7-8 resources, so that is why this card is so strong for us. That's our main deck done, let's crack on to this side deck. We're going to kick things off, well, with a card you've already seen, that's 3 Hidden Sharpshooters. It's a 4 cost with ambush, so you know that means Boba can make it a 5/3, so I bring this card in when we play decks like, well, the Sabines and other aggro decks, just because we can just one-shot things off the board, and that is just so valuable, especially for 4 resources. But yeah, Sabine, like, this card just counters Sabine straight up with Boba. Our next 4 course, we actually run 1 Bright Hope. I told you got multiple. This is when you're playing those space decks that maybe you're struggling with a little bit. Get that Sentinel out there, boost it up. We've then gone for a little bit different of a card. It's a free cost that has free open fires. We put this in here, well, just because if you need a bit of removal. So maybe they're paying shielded units out, just do this, get rid of the shield, ambush over it. Because shields, let me tell you, oh boy, shields are a pain. They counter you hard. So having something like this to get rid of shield is quite nice. Thinking about it, Dare and Raid would probably be better. But yeah, having this then maybe target something in space for 4 damage is also really valuable. Yeah, I'm actually thinking about it, Dare and Raid is probably better. And rounding up our side deck is 3 break-in-ins. So another thing that counters this deck quite hard is Sentinels. So being able to just skip past them, which this card allowed, is good. So what does this card do? Tap unit gets +2 and gains Saboteur for this attack. I normally just straight up change Surprise Strike for breaking in if it's a Sentinel heavy deck. So that is the main deck and side deck done. Here's the deck list for those who want it. So for matchups and thoughts about this deck, well, for matchups, aggro you're actually quite good at just because you're just one-shotting things off the board constantly. And because you've got quite a few late game units, you can just then end up winning through the value of them. Mid-range doesn't really bother you too much. They want to look to bounce things and slow things up. Because you're so quick with that ambush, it just doesn't matter. So against Django, we're actually really good. Because Django likes the course, damage and exhaust. Doesn't matter, we're just ambushing and clearing it off. Control, you absolutely dominate the early game. However, when they get to the late game, it's an issue. Snoke Snoke's just a pain for us. That -2/-2 instantly defeats most of our units. And not just that, it means we're ambushing for basically nothing. Snoke's a pain. So for final thoughts, it's just a really fun off-meta deck that can catch people off guard, and you can take down some really good decks if you play it in the right order. And well, it's just a fun deck. Like, be able to just ambush constantly is absurdly annoying for them to deal with. But even though it's annoying for them, it weirdly feels really good to do it. I really enjoy using this deck, and this is going to be another one that each set I'm just going to keep adding to and improving, because there's always going to be new ambushing cards coming out. There's already that one that's been revealed, which can go in space or ground, and oh, in this deck it's going to be so close. Let me know in the comments what you think about this deck and any changes you may make, and if you try it out, how's it go for you? Thank you guys for watching this video, and hopefully I shall see you in the next one.